Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics like wealth creation strategies, investment principles, creating passive income, paying off your debt faster, and much, much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, we are back again. I am half a shade whiter and we are on for another podcast.
Andrew's just rubbing it in that he's recently been on holidays and his tan is starting to fade. So
I'm just trying to hold on to, the last grasps of the holidays. So rub it in while you can.
That's it. You know what I tend to do actually, just on a side note, bit of a life hack here. When you go on holidays, you can set either your screensaver or your phone.
Yeah.
You select your holiday photos, you put them in a folder and create that as your screensaver, and they'll change every so often. So you'll see photos of you being on holidays basically all the time. And that's how you extend the joy and the benefit.
Depress you even longer because you just have that post-holiday blues.
After a while it does.
As a reminder.
And then it should motivate you to book the next one.
Sounds expensive and the antithesis of what you should be doing in financial planning.
Well, look, funny enough, what are we going to talk to everybody about today, Andrew?
Well, look, today's topic is actually born out of a question that was asked from one of our listeners. She wanted to remain anonymous, but basically the crux of it is, I'm young, I'm working full-time or just started sort of working full-time. I don't have that much money saved up. What are the right steps that I can take in order to be able to get myself in a good financial position? And so what we're going to be talking about today is using that question, and obviously without giving any, personal financial advice, but just talking a bit generally around, all right, look, you may not be, at the stage of doing massive things with your money, but what are the things that you can do early on as someone that's just entering into the workforce in order to be able to set yourself up financially, for the long term?
Yeah, and you went through it there, and I just want to emphasize it because what we're going to talk about is basically the fundamentals of really solid money management, wealth creation, personal finance, and those concepts are the same whether you earn a little bit of money or whether you're a multi-millionaire.
Yeah.
In my opinion, those concepts are the same. So you can apply it to any circumstance that you find yourself in and they won't change. First one, right off the rank, we've said it 1,000 times before. And look, it's easier said than done because it's very easy to spend money these days.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you spend less than you earn. And the bigger that gap between what you earn and what you spend, the better off you're going to be because you can do something with that money.
Yeah, exactly right. And this is just the absolute key fundamental. Everything else falls apart if you're not adhering to this step. Spend less than you earn. And then one step, further to that, spend less than you earn and invest the surplus. You do that as long as you're doing it in some, decent or you're not investing the surplus in, something that is just speculative and is never going to go anywhere. But as long as you're doing that in some, smart approach, you're looking at things long term, you do that consistently, you've achieved financial freedom. Like, that's it. Our job is done as financial planners. Our job as financial advisors is completely sorted. As long as you can adhere to the principle of spend less than you earn and invest the surplus, no matter where you invest that surplus. Now, you can get there faster by doing things in more intelligent ways and by, investing and doing things in a tax efficient manner and all of that stuff. But as long as you adhere to that principle, everything else is going to be fine. All that you're doing is just reducing the time frame.
Great. That's the shortest podcast for us in history. No, absolutely right. And like I said, easier said than done.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, that's kind of like the first.
That's the shining light.
Like first golden rule,
right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
that's it. Okay, what do we do next?
Well, look, the next thing that you want to do is, and we've sort of already alluded to that in that concept of spend less than you earn, is spend less than you earn. But, you know, if you're earning $50,000 a year and you're spending $49,999 a year, technically you're spending less than you earn. And, you know, congratulations, you one-upped us. But what you want to do is make that surplus as large as it can possibly be. And again, within reason, you're not going to, you know, maybe you choose to do it, but most people aren't going to, you know, live off 2-minute noodles and not go out, not do anything, not travel, not enjoy their life in order to, you know, maximize that surplus. But within reason, you're going to try and maximize that surplus as much as you can within your lifestyle, you know, requirements. And in order to do that, you're going to need a good cash flow management system. You don't want to be thinking about this on the fly. You don't want to be thinking about, you know, how much you're spending, where are you allocating money on a regular basis. You want a good cash flow management system where money comes in, automatically gets distributed out towards. And again, I'm, you know, going through another podcast that we've been through. So refer to our previous podcast on cash flow management. But you want to direct debit, you know, your point of sale expenses, your non-point of sale expenses. You want to put money towards, you know, savings. You want to put money towards future goals from an investment standpoint. And you want that all to be automated. If you can get this discipline right, this is literally everything. I mean, it's not everything, but you're 85% on your way into financial freedom if you can just get this system right. It's simple, it's easy, it takes a little bit of work at the start, but if you can get the discipline and you can get the strategy right around your cash flow management, you're so far along and so much further along in your finance journey than 99% of people that the difference is actually ridiculous.
Yeah, and coming back to how that ties into the first dot point, like I mentioned that spending less than you earn, conceptually it sounds easy, but in practical terms, it's difficult. The cash flow management system that you've got, the way that you manage your money, the way that you structure your bank accounts, we've developed a program to make that as simple as we possibly can because we know how much of a challenge that is and how big of a difference that makes to the overall goal down the line. So yeah, I can't reiterate enough that if you do get that right, it becomes easy. You get away from worrying about money. For those that are living paycheck to paycheck, that dissipates and disappears. So not only is there a financial gain, but it takes some of that angst away as well too. So if you haven't heard it, I'd definitely say go back and listen to the podcast or reach out. We can have a chat about it. But you're right, Andrew. You get those two things right, and you're well and truly on your way in order to achieve financial freedom, essentially. And that's different for everybody. We'll talk about that coming up in a sec. But yeah, I can't support your comments enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Next one, Bills?
Well, it ties into what are you aiming for? So getting a clear understanding. And the reason why we say this is if you set yourself goals and you know what you're aiming for, it's easier to, one, achieve them, but two, to be strategic about it, dissect them, reverse engineer it, and away you go. As an example, you know, if we were, I don't know, running a marathon and you set yourself a time and that's what you're aiming for, you work back with your training program, that's what you need to do, as opposed to saying, hey, I just want to run a marathon.
Yeah.
So what is it that you're aiming for? In this particular instance, the listener's question was around property. I think that was something that she was keen on. Same sort of thing. What is it that you're aiming for? Okay, property. How much? What deposit? What's your serviceability? What's your time frame? What's your debt elimination strategy? What's your risk mitigation strategies? And you start to break it down and pull it apart into smaller action items that will achieve your goal longer term.
Yeah. And once you've got a goal, it's all good and well to have savings. And one of the things that I have seen in the past is when you have savings and you don't have a goal associated to it, it becomes a lot easier to say, oh, I've got money in savings. I know that I was putting that towards, you know, investment, or I was going to do something with that money. Just going to go on a quick little holiday, take some of that money out and, you know, spend it in areas that it wasn't actually designed for. But if you've got a goal associated with that and you've said, you know what, this is going towards, you know, funding future property purchase.
Yep.
Well, all of a sudden that money that's sitting there is not just money that's available that I can spend on a holiday. It's got something that's associated with it. You're more likely to stick to it and not draw the money out when you're actually setting a purpose for those funds. And so one of the things that I like to do is change the name of your actual bank account. A lot of banks will nowadays allow you to name a different account and actually put on that, this is property savings. And so every time that you're going into that account that you're tempted to pull money out because you want to go on a holiday or you want to spend some money somewhere else, all of a sudden you're seeing where you're drawing it out from. You're not just pulling it out from a bank account, you're pulling it out from your property savings.
Absolutely. And that's one of the key sort of tricks of the trade that we use, is because it solidifies that goal in somebody's mind. And it's funny how it works, but people are less tempted to deviate from the strategy. That's a really powerful one when we're talking to people with children and they're trying to do something in order to help set their child up financially for the future. It just seems to be that it's such an important goal that it just gets done. It just gets done regardless of how tight things are. There might be a trade-off with something else, but another great tip from that perspective. From my end, investing in yourself, in your education, but in particular, knowledge in basic money management concepts, I think will go a really long way. And I've spoken about it before in terms of the education system and it lacking in, at least in Australia anyway, but it's such a fundamental skill. And even something simple like, credit cards and how detrimental they can be, and payday lenders and the things like that. But a little bit of knowledge, it doesn't need to be a huge amount, but a little bit of knowledge will go a long way in this instance.
Absolutely. And we say invest, but I think when you look at an investment in financial knowledge, especially in this day and age, you're not talking necessarily about investing money. I mean, one of the things that we want to do more of and have done in the past is, seminars, because I think it does something a little bit different to a podcast when you can actually talk to people and they can respond. But, there's podcasts out there. 360 Money Matters podcast for one. Great podcast for knowledge on finance, but no, in all honesty, like there's podcasts, there's videos, there's articles, there's a whole bunch of free education that you can do in order to be able to just get a basic understanding of what's a credit card, what's a home loan, what's principal and interest repayments, what's there's just base level understanding that you can have on finances, so that when you do engage with a professional and they're talking about maybe some more complex topics and some things that outside of your normal run-of-the-mill stuff, you can actually understand and implement those things for yourself as well. One of the things that we also do is have general consultations with clients, so not needing to go down fully fledged financial advice of looking at your own individual circumstances, but talking more generally about some of the things that you can implement on your own with a financial advisor.
We're talking about concepts, really.
Yeah, talk about financial concepts and basically passing on that knowledge, I think is important to be able to just build up your understanding of investing, of financial markets, of money management, in order to be able to implement some of those things in your life, whether it's now or whether it's in a future point in time.
Yeah, yep. Coming back to the surplus piece.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like we've said that this is the number one thing all the time. So it's been a while, Andrew, so I'm going to talk about Warren Buffett.
I knew it. I knew as soon as
definitely predictable,
that smile
right?
came.
No, so it's compounding interest, right? Being the eighth wonder of the world. I think Warren Buffett said that. In terms of the ability to earn interest upon interest. So referring back to what you were saying at the start, getting that surplus and investing it, making sure that it's invested in something appropriate, but then letting it do its thing, is where the compounding impact starts to take its positive effect and really starts to turbocharge your investment. So understanding what compounding interest is, and then having the discipline to do it and not touch it.
Yeah.
And that's a really good example of, say, the superannuation system in Australia, because of the rules of preservation, because of the mandatory contribution rules in terms of when you employ people, you need to pay their super. Because of those two things, our super system is this just compounding machine, and you start your career with no money and you end your career with hopefully millions of dollars. That's contributions and compounding and not touching it, taking its effect. So the sooner you can learn that, I think the more comfortable that you'll be, especially if you're a beginner in the investment world, that you will start investing. You understand that investment markets will go up and down, but you don't touch it. You let it do its thing.
Exactly right. And look, compound interest is incredibly powerful, and 100% is why people should be investing as early as they possibly can. But I'm going to use an example here that may detract a little bit from what we're talking about, but it's just the black and white truth of the matter. And why I'm a proponent of investing early is not just for compound interest. Let's say you invest $10,000, right? Which for someone maybe coming out of university, putting money in is a decent whack of money. You put $10,000 in, and incredible rate of return, you get a 10%, net of fees, all of that stuff comes out of it. You've made $1,000 that year. Maybe you're earning $50,000 a year in your normal job. Is $1,000 over the course of a year actually going to make a difference to your wealth creation? Probably not.
Nope.
Not really going to make a difference.
Not material.
Say the next year you do the same thing again. You invest another $10,000 goes towards investment, and you make another $1,000 on that. Plus the $1,000 you initially invested, that's $2,000, plus 10% of the that additional $100 that you made last time. Now you're talking about $2,100, I think. $2,010.
So he should have done this calculation beforehand, but we get the point, right?
Okay. Again, now you're talking about a couple of grand, or a bit over a couple of grand in interest. Is it going to change your life? Probably not all that much. What is going to happen though is, over the course of those couple of years, yes, you've made a little bit of money and a little bit of profit at the end of it. But what you've done is you've gotten used to investing. You've gotten used to putting money aside. You've gotten used to saving money. You've gained a whole heap of financial knowledge in order to be able to, invest that money and generate a rate of return. So now when you're looking at not putting $10,000 in, but putting substantially more money in and snowballing that over the course of a number of years, you're comfortable with it, you've done it before, you understand how it works, and all of a sudden you're armed with knowledge and power to be able to make larger steps and more impactful investment decisions. So yes, the return, the compound interest is really important and is a given in what you're doing over the course of your financial knowledge and your financial journey. But the intangible aspect of that is the comfort levels and knowledge that you can understand along the way by doing something like that. And so, yes, there's, tangible financial benefits associated with it, but there's so much more in intangible benefits that you'll also gain by investing that money and putting money aside on a regular basis as well.
So it's the lesson.
Yeah,
the lesson, at least in the earlier stages, is more valuable than the outcome.
Exactly right.
At least in the earlier stages. So, speaking of investing, looking at potentially lower cost index ETF funds as your first foray into investing, because you want to keep your costs as low as you possibly can, simply because you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of firepower. At least in those earlier stages. We're making an assumption here with the listener who wrote the question in, but definitely something along those lines. And then as your balance starts to get bigger and you can dive into different types of investment styles to maybe try and get a bit of alpha, to try and get a bit of a higher return than what the overall market is getting, you can consider that. But definitely at the start, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the index funds have hit a really good sort of market in that segment. And I also think that, at least from myself, growing up, which wasn't that long ago. I mean, I'm still relatively young in comparison to Billy, but
See, I've missed that, haven't I? I made the decision while you were away. I'm sticking with age 39, and I'm never getting a day older. Yeah.
Okay.
Forever 39.
I'll let you stick with that one.
Yep.
But no, I think in this day and age, what ETFs, index funds, have done in this generation is they've given, and what technology has done is they've given access to investments and an entry into investments quite easy and simple that prior generations may not have actually had.
Yep.
And so I think it's a great way and a great entryway into starting your financial planning journey.
Yeah. And look on the investing side as well too. Good quality investments. So avoid the fads, avoid the trends, long-term assets or longer-term asset classes that have got a history of performance in different market cycles is definitely our preference, because we overlay this with some risk mitigation strategies as well too, like diversification. But definitely, stay away in terms of your main investment strategy. You stay away from the shiny toys because they're just that. And you don't know if they're going to be the next Google or if they're going to be the next, I don't know what a good example of a company that promised a hell of a lot. I'm trying to think of some stuff during the .com era of those companies that existed but don't anymore. Can't think of it. And I guess that's exactly the point.
Exactly the point. Yeah. The ones that you forget about after they're busted and gone.
Yep. Super.
Yeah, especially if you've had, a fair few part-time jobs in the past, especially if you've, sort of been through a couple of different jobs and might have multiple superannuation funds, consolidate it into one fund, make sure that you're not paying multiple sets of fees, which is what you're doing when you're holding, multiple superannuation funds. Have a look at your superannuation. Yep. Agree that, we're talking about an asset that you're probably not going to touch for another 40 years, but what you want to do is the earlier that you start, the earlier that you make sure that this is in good quality assets, in a fund that's been performing well, in a fund that's not charging exorbitant fees. Look at your superannuation, consolidate it into one, and do that little bit of research to get yourself on the front foot early on, because the earlier you start, the better off you're ultimately going to be at the end.
Yep. And understanding where it's invested to, that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Understand where it's invested. Make sure it matches your risk tolerance. I mean, a fund will default put you into an investment option, but you might be more conservative as an investor and not actually want your money to be invested in, growth assets. You might be, an ethical investor and not want to be supporting certain aspects of investment markets. You might decide that you want to go super aggressive because you're young and you've got the time frame to, ride the waves from an investment standpoint. So just make sure that ultimately, you're looking at the investments and you're looking at the overall strategy of what you're trying to do with your super as well. And even consider, put a small amount of salary sacrifice into it in order to help offset your tax. But in addition to that, help your superannuation compound. I mean, we're talking about 40 odd years of compounding. That's huge. Every dollar that you put in today compounded for 40 years is a ridiculous amount in terms of how much you put in versus what you actually get out.
Yeah, and the felt change of putting in, I'll throw some numbers out there, $50 a week, right? You could probably not even feel that versus what that would translate to over a working career of compounding in terms of finalised wealth creation. It's definitely something to look at. And, depending on someone's circumstances, we even talk to our younger clients about that as well too, because that's always a consideration. But yeah, that's a really interesting point with superannuation. And I guess probably the final thing from my end is that sits around that risk piece and thinking about, okay, especially when you're younger, what's your income earning potential over your working career? So take something like income protection for argument's sake, and let's say you earn $100,000 a year and you're 39 years of age like I am, and something happens and you can't earn that $100,000, what are you going to do? So in this instance, we're talking, 26 years between my age now of 39 versus when most people consider retirement age is 65. So you're talking about 200, what did we say, 26 at $100,000 a year. You're talking about 2.6 million in earning potential between now and age 65. And that's without things like indexation, pay increases, job changes, all of those sorts of things. So getting protection and cover around that is critical in terms of any particular strategy, because if it goes wrong, it basically derails everything.
Yeah.
So staying employed is critical, and earning income, obviously that's a given, but making sure that you're protected in case something goes untoward, that you've got enough there to be able to cover you.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a risk mitigation, strategy in place, which generally is a little bit simpler for someone that's, younger. If we're talking, I don't know the actual age of the listener that posted the question, but if you're talking about someone that's in their mid-20s as opposed to someone that's in their late 30s, all of a sudden, you might be talking about, rather than $2.9 million, $4 million if you take an average earning of $100,000 a year. It's a huge amount of money, and making sure that there is a risk mitigation in place. If there is a loss of income because of anything untoward happening, you want to make sure that there is something there. So make sure that there is a risk mitigation strategy at the end of all of this as well.
Andrew, love it.
Awesome. Well, hopefully that answered the question and gave our listener a little bit more information and armed themselves with a bit more knowledge to be able to just set themselves up on the right foot. And hopefully to all of the other listeners, whether you're young and starting off, or whether you've been in your wealth creation journey for a long period of time, I think that all of these principles are things that you can utilize at any stage in your investment and wealth journey.
Yeah. Love it. To our listeners and our viewers, thank you once again for your attention. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to catching you on the next one. Like and subscribe as always, and we'll see you then.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we've talked about, or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
Just a reminder to our listeners that the information contained in this podcast is general in nature, and it is not intended as personal recommendations for the audience. Please consider whether the information suits your circumstances before acting on it. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of AMP Financial Planning.